Welcome back to the Done Deal Show with Ben Jacobs this morning. Lots going on in the transfer market. Will Ronaldo go to Chelsea? Lots of people reporting an imminent or expected bid for the player from Thomas Tuchel's men. We're looking at the Raphinha deal this morning. There's a deadline that's been set that Ben Jacobs revealed yesterday by Leeds United, as Barca still don't have an agreement in place. We are going to take a look at Arsenal. We're going to look at Man City with Sterling on his way to Chelsea as well, plus the Lisandro Martinez deal, a bit of Lewandowski, Neymar. We're going to go right across the spectrum today. Ben, absolute pleasure to have you back on the show. How are you, my friend?
Nice and early this morning, and I apologise to everyone if I sound a little bit groggy because I left Old Trafford for the opening game of the Women's Euros last night at about 1 o'clock in the morning and then jumped on a train back up to Edinburgh at 6 in the morning. So round about 30 minutes in, if I suddenly doze off, which I think most of the people listening would appreciate because they say that I never shut up, then that is the reason why, because I'm a little bit more tired than I would normally be coming on this show.
Not a problem. Appreciate you being here. I know yesterday you had the train delay, so we moved it to today. And I'm kind of glad we moved it to today because things have kind of, again, media-wise on social media, things have really kind of picked up in the last 24 hours again, especially this morning with the Cristiano Ronaldo news, which I know we're going to start with because it's on the sort of the tip of everybody's tongues right now. United conceding that he's going to go. Big reports around Chelsea. But viewers, do me a favor before we start. If we hit 1,250 likes on this show today, what we will do, I've already pinned the live. I think I've already pinned the live comment out. I think I pinned the live comment. If I didn't pin the live comment, I'll do it now. I'm going to pin the live comment now. If we hit 1,500 likes, I will gift 20 free memberships. If we hit 3,000 likes while we're live, I will give out 50 free memberships to you, the viewers, during this show. So make sure you're smashing that like and share button. But Cristiano Ronaldo, Ben, it now looks almost a certainty that he will leave Manchester United. The vast majority of media outlets today stating that the board and Ten Hag have kind of accepted this. They're going to bow down to his demands and move him on. Chelsea, it's been reported, might go in for him. What's your view on this, and where do you think Cristiano Ronaldo will end up?
So the first thing to point out, I think, is just that long ago, when this first kind of broke that Ronaldo was a little bit unhappy with a variety of things, from a 25% pay cut through to summer transfer activity, I said one thing, that we're going to see whether this is Manchester United with power or Cristiano Ronaldo with power. And my take was always that Manchester United can say until they're blue in the face that Ronaldo is not for sale. But if CR7 wants to leave and continues not to turn up to training, then Manchester United have to find a solution. And there's only going to be one winner in that battle between CR7 and Manchester United. And that's what you get in signing a star. And that's also a warning, by the way, to any prospective suitor that Ronaldo could pull similar kind of power-based tricks wherever he goes, if he feels he should be starting more, if he wants more control over the dressing room. So it's a warning sign. And Ronaldo is your poison and your medicine, because you cannot dispute his goal-scoring stats, but he has to play in a certain kind of system. He's 37 years of age, and he comes with baggage. Good baggage for your brand, but potentially bad baggage for your dressing room if things don't go according to plan. And sadly, that's exactly what's happened at Manchester United. So the situation is that Manchester United are now privately of the acceptance that they will sell him, but still for what's being loosely called a satisfactory offer. And satisfactory in Manchester United's mind is financial to some extent, but it's also about finding Ronaldo the right exit without, if they possibly can, selling him to a Premier League rival. And here's what makes it really interesting, because Bayern Munich's interest was genuine and could become genuine again still if Lewandowski gets his move to Barcelona. But right now they're saying on record that they are not interested. A Real Madrid return, highly unlikely. Barcelona want every single player under the sun. They're going to be mentioned, but there's no substance to it. PSG are categorically not interested, which is a shame to the football purists that would just like to be able to say Messi and Ronaldo playing together with Neymar and Mbappe, but they're distancing themselves. So only Chelsea and Napoli are really left in the race at the moment, and Chelsea are not ruling themselves out, but they're putting the decision on Thomas Tuchel. And here again is another interesting dynamic. So if you've got Manchester United versus Ronaldo, and Ronaldo's got the power, you've then at Chelsea got Tuchel versus Boehly or the ownership group. And the new American-led consortium really would like Ronaldo. And they know for them, it's win-win from a brand perspective, because you're going to be paying certainly under 20 million. And from a brand perspective, everything from shirt sales, marketing to new partners, moving to new regions and so on, you're going to be able to cash in. And I think that the evidence of the value in Ronaldo, even at 37 at that price, is obvious to Todd Boehly. But Thomas Tuchel has to make a football decision. And if Chelsea sign Ronaldo, of course, we're going to hear that Tuchel always wanted Ronaldo. He fits into the system. Chelsea's style is a bit different to Manchester United's. They build up patiently on the edge of the box. Ronaldo would be able to pull the strings, drop a bit deep, and still get his 20 plus goals. And that might be correct. And Roy Keane last season half joked, and it has now become slightly prophetic, that if Ronaldo was in the Chelsea team, he'd get 50 plus goals. So there is a tactical fit, but it doesn't make football sense necessarily to bring on board a 37-year-old with baggage. And that's the situation at the moment. So reports, for example, that Chelsea are preparing a £14 million bid have not been stood up at this stage by Chelsea. There's denials from the Mendes camp as well that anything is that formulated. And 48 hours ago as well, Chelsea were saying that Tuchel must sit down in depth with Boehly before any kind of proposal proceeds. And as I understand it, that conversation has not happened in enough depth to get Chelsea to the point of tabling an official bid. So when you hear preparing, when you hear the value out there, all of that might be in the ballpark of reality if Chelsea proceed. But I don't think it's quite accurate at this stage to say that they've actually written down on a bit of paper and are about to send something that formal. And if they are, then Mendes is in the dark. Chelsea are saying that they are still in the dark as to being that advanced. And at the same time, Manchester United are claiming that they are not aware of that. So everything is heading into the direction of Chelsea are still at the table. Napoli are still really keen as well. Chelsea is a move that Ronaldo is thought to be very open to. And usually when these figures get leaked out in reports, they have some kind of substance to them. But to reiterate, at the time of recording, and it could change within the next 24 or 48 hours, there is a distancing at the moment from a Chelsea perspective with any notion that they've actually got a formal proposal ready to go. And I think the reason for that is because if Chelsea do proceed, they want to make it absolutely clear in the narrative that Thomas Tuchel has had time and also the ability to look at other targets. So are Chelsea going to get Raphinha? What does Raheem Sterling think about all of this? And then how does Ronaldo fit into those two and the rest of the team? And it may need almost a pre-season in America for Tuchel to make up his mind. That's the intimation that I've been given, that much like Arsenal and Tielemans, Arteta wants to look at what he's got and then ideally, having seen it for a match or two, then decide if he's going to pull the trigger. And I feel like, talking to sources, it's the same with Tuchel as well. So it's all very well kind of building hype. And I know that fans listening would love me to just say, yep, it's completely true. The offer's going to be made. It's likely he's going to Chelsea. And others will say, why can't you just give us a clear-cut answer? But this is going to be complicated. It's going to drag on. There's egos at stake. There's friction between Manchester United and Chelsea in any possible sale. There's the fact that Thomas Tuchel hasn't made his mind up. And that's why I'm more of the belief at this point, whether that figure is right or wrong. And even if a move to Chelsea does materialize, that the next step in all of this is Thomas Tuchel seeing who else he can bring in, with Sterling being the first, and then looking at everyone for a game or two in pre-season. So then if he says to his owners, who definitely do want Ronaldo or are intrigued by Ronaldo is the more accurate way of putting it, if Tuchel then says to the ownership group, go ahead at that price, it makes sense on a football side now. He will at least have backed up that decision based on assessing his squad in pre-season and other incomings, rather than being too quick about it and then finding that Ronaldo arrives and it backfires.
So much of what you said there makes sense. I think that the bit you've just said there, so it doesn't lose my mind, is this echoes what you've been saying for the last couple of shows here. And I've been pushing it out on so many of mine because I think it's brilliant what you said. We've still got, at this point, there's 6.5 weeks or so of the transfer window to remaining. Clubs don't necessarily need to rush into decision-making right now. There's a very good article in The Athletic that spoke about the idea of using Raheem Sterling centrally. If you bring in Ronaldo, then Raheem Sterling may not be getting used centrally as much. So Thomas Tuchel has to consider all of these things. In terms of Man United letting him go and losing the battle, I feel like it's been said so many times in recent years that if you get a club that doesn't want the player, or you get a player that doesn't want the club anymore, generally speaking, if there's a push from one side, something gets done. You kind of got the West Ham and Declan Rice is such an interesting one because Declan Rice isn't really pushing hard for a move. But if he did and started putting in transfer requests, started doing, going to golf courses with Gary Neville, I'm sure that situation would suddenly change somewhat. So I see Ronaldo leaving. Where he goes from now, as you already alluded to, it's kind of hard to work out where he may end up. In terms of Manchester United, of course, there's talk of an Anthony bid. There's the Lisandro Martinez deal that they're really focusing after. Of course, we secured the signature of a certain Christian Eriksen. What do you think United would do from here? Will it be business as usual? Let's get Lisandro done, then we'll move on to someone like Anthony? Or do you think there may be a change in Man United's approach with Ronaldo going in terms of bringing in someone to replace those goals?
Well, they need the replacement of goals, don't they? And in addition to that, they need to move on from the saga. And that's why I think Manchester United have accepted that Ronaldo will go, providing an offer comes in that's acceptable. And I get that fans who either have an affinity for Ronaldo or just a rivalry against Chelsea won't like that. And it's quite a tough pill to swallow, I would imagine, for a Manchester United fan, because you don't only face the unexpected prospect of losing Ronaldo and all of those goals and everything that he comes with, but then if he ended up at Chelsea, hypothetically, then you almost feel like you've lost out to Chelsea, and all the Chelsea fans celebrating will be the kind of mood across social media and fan bases generally that will really make Manchester United realize how far they've fallen. And that is what Ten Hag has to recover from. So do you get that new era and that recovery with or without Ronaldo? And this comes back to what Thierry Henry said, where Cristiano Ronaldo is your poison and your medicine. Manchester United, in all likelihood, wouldn't have even qualified for any European football without Ronaldo last season. He scored 20 plus goals. And since the age of 22, he's got a goal every 2 games or better throughout his entire career. So anybody kind of saying that Ronaldo's a passenger, Ronaldo doesn't track back, Ronaldo doesn't defend, Ronaldo's not team orientated, the goals offset that, and he scores regularly enough that he silences his critics even at the age of 37, and that may well be what gets him a move to a club like Chelsea. Yet by the same token, there's that poison element, and who knows whether Maguire's was intentional or just an accident. But what I do know, talking to sources, is that there's a friction because Ronaldo's come back into Manchester United and he's seen firsthand how far the club has fallen in its level of work ethic, professionalism, ambition. And on top of that, he then discovers that Ten Hag has come in with a new plan and new targets, and he's reportedly disappointed with all of that. I actually think the transfer aspect of Ronaldo's alleged disappointment is a little bit harsh because Ten Hag has gone out there quite quickly. He's been a big part of all negotiations. Malacia has come in. Eriksen has basically come in, and that will be announced in the next 24 hours, if not before. Then if, and it is a big if, they get De Jong, that would be a win. There's not much more that Manchester United can do regarding trying to get De Jong. So Ten Hag and United can't really be criticised for that. They're in the mix for Martinez. They're in the mix for Anthony. And we're still pretty early in the window. So I really don't think that you can overly criticise Manchester United's transfer
I agree with you, Ben. Sorry to interject. I've said, you said it a bit earlier about if Chelsea sign Ronaldo, it will be the word will be it was always a Tuchel target. He fits the system. We all know the way the clubs do that, the PR. I believe what Ronaldo's camp are doing is clever. They know a lot of United fans are angry about the transfer window, so give the reason for leaving to be the transfer window, and a lot of them are just then on your side because you're. It's that I see a lot of this in the news now. It's always a case of. Lukaku tried to do it for me at Chelsea. I know some Chelsea fans are umming and ahhing about the style. So I'll say my reason I'm not scoring is I'll blame Tuchel's style. It plants that seed. It feeds into the confirmation bias of certain people. I just think Ronaldo wants to go because there's no Champions League football and he's 37 years of age and he doesn't want to have a year where Messi's scoring Champions League goals and he can't. I think it's really as simple as something along those lines. If we were in the Champions League, I think he'd be staying because he knows he can score those goals. But it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. It really, really is. I did want to ask you about Lisandro Martinez. You kind of mentioned him there. The news is kind of the same for the past 2 or 3 days. The players pushing for the move. United are reportedly leading the race, but Arsenal are not pulling away. What's the latest on this deal as you understand it? And when could we expect this to be resolved?
Yeah, I'll come on to Martinez just to respond to Ronaldo quickly. The other thing just to keep in the back of your mind is that any exit will have a universal PR swept across it. So Ronaldo does want to keep a positive relationship with Manchester United Football Club and the fan base. And Manchester United obviously don't want the exit to be acrimonious. And again, that's why they won't let it drag on. But just keep in mind that Maguire then unlike, and this 25% pay cut, because I think that's rattled not just Ronaldo, but a range of players at United. And I've got to be honest, I've got mixed reports on this, but the overriding view is that it was no surprise whatsoever to any of the players. And therefore, if you go into a season with that hovering over you, it could be deemed to be unfair. But by the same token, Manchester United should always be aspiring to Champions League football. If they don't make Champions League football, it's a massive failure. So if Ronaldo entered that season knowing that if there was no Champions League football, then he would lose 25% of his pay, to then use that as a reason for wanting to leave is pretty unfair on the football club. And obviously, if he for any reason thought he was exempt from that, or it wouldn't apply to him because he hit personal targets, that's a different matter for him to then go back to the club and negotiate. But obviously football clubs try not to do one set of financials for the team and then stars are exempt or different because it creates friction and bad blood in the dressing room. But I think the point that I'm making on the Ronaldo exit from Manchester United's point of view is just that bringing in Ronaldo was all about the club moving in a Champions League and positive direction in a football sense, in a strategic sense, in a brand sense. And Ronaldo feels that he's played his part because his goals tally warrants that. And he dragged Ollie out of trouble on a number of occasions, and he bailed out Ranić, and he finished the season with 20 plus goals. So therefore, Ronaldo feels he's done everything he can at Manchester United, but the culture of the club doesn't match his own standards and ambition. And that's the shock, that from day one, Ronaldo's returned to Manchester United and gone, wow, this is not the same club as I thought it was. It's like buying a Ferrari that's brand new and saying, I love that red Ferrari, and then deciding that you're going to go away in a different car or on a cycle, and then seeing the red Ferrari and being like, oh yeah, I'll buy that back, and then opening the door and finding that it's full of garbage and Harry Maguire's at the wheel. And this is the issue, really, that Manchester United from the outside and the inside are two completely different things. But anyway, coming back to Martinez, the situation hasn't moved too much, whereas last week, towards the end of the week, we got a ton of movement. So when we last spoke, my update was on the Monday and we had a chat on the Wednesday, and Manchester United were not really in the race at all, and Arsenal were preparing a third bid. By Friday, United made their move and bid a little bit higher than Arsenal And then Martinez himself made it very clear to Ajax that he wanted to move to the Premier League. And he said Premier League, not specifically Manchester United or Arsenal. And if you talk to Manchester United sources, they reveal that Ten Hag is pushing really hard. This is the priority, far more so at the moment than Antony, and maybe even more than De Jong, because that deal has kind of stalled and had so many twists and turns. So it's very easy to say, well, he knows Ten Hag, he likes Ten Hag, it's a natural fit. Manchester United just have to agree a fee and it's a deal done. But the twist, as I said last week, is that Arsenal are also extremely confident, and the challenge for Manchester United coming in late, even with the Ten Hag factor, was always going to be the fact that Arsenal were more advanced. So Martinez was also very sold on talking to Arteta. And from what I understand, Arteta is taking a much more active, direct role in this transfer window than in previous ones. He's calling up players, he's pitching the club directly, he's co-selling with Edu, and it's working for Arsenal to some extent. Certainly with Gabriel Jesus, it was Arteta that was one of the big clinching aspects of that. And obviously he knows Jesus from his time at Manchester City, but it was still the fact that he was able to sell Arsenal, not just himself as a manager. And therefore, when you talk to Arsenal sources, they say it's an open race and they're equally as confident. And maybe the instability at Manchester United at the moment and Ronaldo's future will work against their bid for Martinez. Because if I was a prospective Manchester United player right now, the first thing I would want to know is, am I or aren't I in a dressing room with CR7? Even though Martinez and his position doesn't directly feed or impact CR7, some players will join Manchester United for Man U, some will join for Ten Hag, some will join because they want to play with Ronaldo, some will reject because they don't want to play with Ronaldo, or they don't think that style suits him, or they've heard things in the dressing room and so on. So I think that the instability at Manchester United slightly opens the door back in Arsenal's favour, but I think it's 50-50 at the moment. And then the other factor is that nobody's agreed a deal with Ajax. So Manchester United have got the higher offer slightly, but the worry for both clubs is it turns into a bit of a bidding war, and Ajax know the player desperately wants to leave, and they're holding out for kind of 4 or 5 million than they were originally. So I thought that it would only take about 40 million plus add-ons, maybe 41, 42, up to a deal of about 45. But now sources are indicating that Ajax are going to want a lot closer to 50, and Manchester United particularly don't necessarily have that ability just to add another 5 if they want another target like a De Jong or an Antony. And we had that discussion last week. So I think Manchester United still think they're the firm favourites and they've hijacked the Arsenal bid, but Arsenal are still talking with extreme confidence as well. So this is one of the most open races currently in the transfer window. And still there is that challenge of the fact that Ajax are proving tough to negotiate with.
Yeah, I was talking to some gooners the other day. The fact that Man United and Arsenal are now both in, it's a great position for Ajax because they can just keep, there's one team and the players asking to leave. It creates that sort of situation. Of course, Lisandro doesn't have the power at Ajax that Ronaldo has in football, but it's the same principle. If he's pushing to leave and there's a club bidding, it makes it hard to keep a player. Players don't like that feeling of disappointment at the end. But when you've got two clubs, or you can just push the envelope. You can make them bid more. You can hopefully try and create a bidding war. And I know we're going to get onto Raphinha later. That's kind of happened there. Leeds are probably going to end up with a lot more money than if it was just Barcelona chasing him and the Prem clubs didn't come in. But I agree with you. I think it is so 50-50 on that deal. As a United fan, I want to believe we're going to do it. But I think to write Arsenal off is ridiculous. I know people like to do that. Arteta doesn't have any pull. You keep hearing rivals say, why would anybody go to Arsenal? They're Arsenal Football Club. They don't need Champions League football to attract some players will want it, but not everybody, and we're going to move on to Youri Tielemans in a minute. And I know there's interest from other clubs there, but Man United and Arsenal are going for a few of the same players or a couple of the same players. And these battles are really, really interesting. And it's one of those deals where I just kind of want it done so we can move on from it because I'm very nervous as a football fan. I'm confident we can do it, but I feel like there could be a sting in the tail. Absolutely no doubt about it. And the other deal involving Man United and Arsenal, and I think I'm quoting you here verbatim. I've seen this on socials today, that Man United's interest in Youri Tielemans is growing, and could finally provoke a formal bid from Arsenal. What's the latest around Youri Tielemans? And is there a possibility here that Man United could come in and sign someone like him instead of a Frankie de Jong?
I think the Tielemans situation is in Arsenal's hands. So if Arsenal bid, Arsenal get Tielemans. I've said that pretty consistently for the last 6 weeks. Tielemans is sold on an Arsenal move. He's agreed terms. He's been talking to Arsenal through his representatives for the best part of a year. And he was fixed on an Arsenal move that he thought was near definite in January this summer. And everything was lined up. Arsenal did all the legwork. Leicester were never going to sell in January. And I think Youri Tielemans simply felt that Arsenal would come back in early in the window, deal done. And I've explained this before, but for those that haven't heard it, Tielemans wanted to join Arsenal before he went to Monaco, but was worried it was the wrong stage of his career and he wouldn't get enough first-team football. So a move back to Arsenal now would be full circle. And he even was prepared to go there without waiting for any other offers if Arsenal came in early this window, despite the lack of Champions League football and despite, before Bissouma, Tottenham's interest. Tottenham are now not interested in Tielemans, and they very much distanced themselves from any recent links suggesting that there's room for a Tielemans and a Bissouma. So Arsenal haven't ever put a formal offer to Leicester. And one of the reasons for that is because it shouldn't be a particularly complicated deal with his contract running down. And you can do a deal in two very basic ways. One is you go player first, you get verbal terms like Barcelona have done with Raphinha. Then you go to the club and you use the fact you've got the player on side as leverage. And the other way around is the De Jong style deal where you negotiate in depth with the club. And then both clubs want the sale. So then when you go to the player, it's a lot harder to get friction from the player because the player is aware that buyer and seller are on the same page. So with Tielemans, Arsenal went to Tielemans and then they'll go to Leicester if they choose to make a bid. And at the lowest end, it will be 25 million. And at the highest end, it will be 32, 33 million, something in that region. Leicester are looking to get as close as they can to the fee that they paid for Tielemans. And Arsenal's perspective has always been that the fee should be 4 or 5 million cheaper because of Tielemans' contract situation. So Arsenal are waiting, possibly because Arteta wants to see what he's got in pre-season, and he knows that Tielemans will say yes if Arsenal come in within a reasonable time frame. And obviously the other factor is just that they brought in Fabio Vieira. I think that Tielemans and Vieira can play together in sort of 8 and 10. And then Arsenal turned their attention to Jesus and tried for Raphinha. And now they're coming back into seemingly that midfield role with Milinkovic-Savic, who's less likely for Arsenal, and Tielemans as well. So they're still there. Arsenal have always been there. This notion that they walked away is incorrect. It's a long window and you don't have to do everything within the first 2 weeks. So Tielemans has never been told by Arsenal that the deal's off. The contact has always been maintained between Tielemans and Arsenal. But it is absolutely true that Arsenal have never put in an offer. So the simple answer is if Arsenal put in an offer, Tielemans wants to go to Arsenal. If Arsenal don't put in an offer, that's when it gets interesting because Tielemans would still rather move for European football than stay at Leicester. He'd still rather move to a big club like Manchester United than have to extend at Leicester City. And he would like his future resolved as early as possible in a World Cup year. So I don't see him either staying at Leicester until January and waiting to see what happens. Newcastle are growing in their interest. Dan Ashworth has made inquiries, but nothing as yet has materialised. So if there is to be a rival to Arsenal, it's most likely to be Manchester United. And that's kind of interesting in itself because Ralf Rangnick really liked Tielemans as well. And when Rangnick's Manchester United made inquiries, and Arsenal were obviously pretty advanced in January as well, Tielemans intimated that he didn't want to go to United under Rangnick. And of course, he said that because he thought the Arsenal deal was almost certain to happen. Now, not under Rangnick, Ten Hag has kind of revived the interest. So as opposed to picking up an old target, Ten Hag has actually actively and directly put Tielemans on a short list of possibilities. So it may be that if Tielemans doesn't get an offer from Arsenal and Manchester United put something in, then Tielemans can be persuaded to go to Manchester United because it's a different manager, it's a new era, and he doesn't have that other option, and he still wants some form of European football. But I think more likely is if Man U bid first, it would prompt Arsenal to actually do something, and then he would end up still at Arsenal. So if I had to hedge a bet on it, not that I like doing this, I still think Arsenal is the more likely destination. But if Arsenal just decide amidst interest from other suitors they're not going to proceed, then suddenly there is big hope for Manchester United or Newcastle, because Tielemans doesn't want to stay at Leicester.
Of course, and I think that's and we're going to move on to Raphinha very soon. So viewers, make sure we've still got Raphinha updates, Neymar, Lewandowski, and other players that we're going to be speaking about on the show. Remember, if we hit 1,500 likes while we're live, I'm going to gift out 20 free memberships to you, the viewers. If we hit 3,000 likes, I will give 50 free membership packages away to you live on the air. So make sure you're smashing the like and share button. Lots more news and updates from Ben Jacobs to come. I think on the I agree with everything you've said there. I make Arsenal front runners based on what people like yourself and others have said. You know, I'm not going to look outside of that. There's something about Arsenal's window, though. I believe like some of their movements, some of their behavior, some of the players they've gone for are excellent. There's always been this thought in my mind, though, that cooling the interest on Tielemans because you think you've got him can become dangerous. And I always remember back to what was reported around Man United signing Lukaku. Now, not that deal worked out for us, really and truly, barring that probably the opening 10 games and that night in Paris. But what was reported after he signed is that Chelsea were leading, but it was Man United that then, throughout the course of the summer, showed more interest, made more calls, made the player feel more wanted. And I suppose that's the only area where I could see Man United maybe getting in front slightly is if Tielemans gets to a point where he says, well, they keep telling me they want me, they keep telling me I'm this target, but yet they're not bidding, and suddenly Man United have proposed something they want to, you know, if you get where I'm coming from. Now, I still think if Arsenal come back in, they'll get him, but it depends on when in the window. And I think there are some United fans that kind of want Tielemans. I've seen a lot of tweets today from people saying, you know, massive improvement on McTominay, massive improvement on Fred, which I agree with. So there's this element of if you can pick him up for 25, 30 million pounds, which I've seen as the quoted prices, it makes sense. But I also get this feeling that Man United will go, but if we bid and then Arsenal come back in, all clubs love to avoid this rejection notion, don't they? This sort of like, oh, you got beat to a player by a certain individual. It becomes almost a game of cat and mouse, when to bid, when not to. It's certainly an intriguing one. And with Man United and Arsenal, Lisandro Martinez looking at Youri Tielemans, by the end of this summer, one of those two clubs could have some serious sort of transfer bragging rights over the other, which is always a painful experience if you're on the losing end. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where those deals go. And I think the exciting thing for both clubs is they're both very good players who improve their first teams, if that makes sense. So it's not like we're arguing over a 17-year-old. We don't know how good or bad it'll be. Like, you know, these are two established football players in a great age profile in their mid-20s, but we're still with the best part of their careers ahead of them. So yeah, it's exciting times for fans, absolutely no doubt. You mentioned a moment ago about like Arsenal pulling away from Raphinha, but the Raphinha situation is very interesting. And I know that, you know, you've had some tweets that have gone out about this, that there's been a deadline set, which is reportedly today for Barca to agree a deal. I read some reports a week ago that Barca had pretty much come to an agreement, but it turns out that isn't true. They haven't got an agreement yet with Leeds United for Raphinha. What's the latest on that? And could Chelsea still end up with their man?
Well, Chelsea's offer is still there. They've certainly not withdrawn it. And Raphinha's got a decision to make. And Leeds would rather sell to Chelsea, fundamentally, despite the fact that the fan bases and the clubs have got a little bit of history and edge. I have to say that Todd Boehly really impressed the Leeds ownership in his openness, candidness, honesty, and speed in getting that deal. And Leeds have signed Sinisterra, and therefore they've effectively spent some of the money that they're expecting from Raphinha and replaced him. And of course, if Raphinha ends up starting pre-season at Leeds United, Jesse Marsch is not going to say, I don't want him there. But privately, the last thing that Marsch will want is to start a season with uncertainty, because you play Raphinha if he's at Leeds United, but you almost don't want to play Raphinha if you know that he might be going in the coming weeks or months, because you have to bed in the new players and the existing team to replace what Raphinha brings Leeds United. And Leeds struggled for goals and, oddly, creativity last season, even though we sort of associate Leeds with being very gung-ho, very attack-minded. They didn't score a ton of goals. They leaked a lot. And Raphinha was really important to them. So you want him, but you also want to resolve his future. And that is Leeds' position. And that's why Leeds have been very impressed by the speed at which Chelsea have moved. The agreement is there. From Barcelona's perspective, Leeds have been clear. They have said repeatedly now for the best part of 3 weeks that Barcelona must match the financial valuation of Chelsea's offer. And there will be no deal if they fail to do that. And Barcelona have tried staggered payments. They've tried a lower base fee with add-ons, taking the total up to what Chelsea are paying. And Leeds are not convinced at this point. So Leeds are open to a different payment scheme, including staggered payments, because they appreciate Barcelona's financial situation. And they've also naturally spoken to Raphinha. And it's clear that in an ideal world, Raphinha would like to be a Barcelona player. But the Leeds stance is that this must be done quickly and this window. So the reports that Raphinha will be allowed to stay at Leeds until January and then Barcelona will, let's say, promise to buy him are nonsense, because Leeds have said directly to Barcelona and on more than one occasion, if you cannot afford him now, or if you cannot buy him now, i.e. agree a deal with us, then what's the point in waiting until January? Because if you've got staggered payments, you don't need to wait until January. The point here is, can the two clubs agree a deal? And if they can't agree a deal now, they won't agree a deal in January. Because this isn't about, oh, Barca would have the money in January, but not now, because Leeds are open to a different payment scheme. They're not going to ask, like with Chelsea, which is quite rare in a deal anyway, for all of the money up front. Chelsea's tactic was to give Leeds a ton of money up front at a high offer and get it done quickly to try and force the issue and push Barca out of the market. The reaction from Barca was to start negotiating as quickly as they could with Leeds, but no deal has been done at the moment. So the deadline, as I understand it today, is for Barcelona to table their latest offer. Some in Spain are reporting it as a final offer. And I have to be clear here, because my information as reported is a latest offer. And then from there, it will have a period of assessment and negotiation. And some might construe it as it has to be a final offer now, but that is not my understanding. It is latest offer deadline. But I think that by implication at the Barca end, if they can't get a deal done with this round of talks or somewhere close, then they will try another tact or to walk away. So you could interpret it as a final offer, but the term used to me was latest offer. And Barcelona still are saying that they're confident of getting the deal done, even though I think that Lewandowski is their priority. So then if the deadline doesn't lead to any kind of agreement, that then does open the door again to Chelsea, because again, contrary to some other reports out there, particularly in Spain, Raphinha is perfectly fine with going to Chelsea, and not just perfectly fine, excited by Chelsea. And the reason for that is because it's a pay rise, it's Champions League football. So he's got two good job offers almost. His dream is Barcelona, but if they can't get it done in a World Cup year by the end of this window, then he will, in my opinion, move to Chelsea instead, as opposed to staying at Leeds until January or for the remainder of the season. Now, the challenge is then what Chelsea do, because Chelsea sources are implying, especially with, say, like a player like Ronaldo on their radar, that they don't want to let it drag on. They don't want to just have an offer dangling throughout the entire window, even if they get him at the end of the window, because it puts all the power and control in Raphinha's court and with Barcelona, because Raphinha can go, great, I've got two options, I'll decide at the end of the window. Barcelona can go, brilliant, we've got until the end of the window to try and get a deal. So this is why Leeds are putting deadlines on it, and this is why Chelsea might say to Raphinha after this next round of talks with Barcelona, once things become clearer over the next day or two, Chelsea might say, well, okay, you've not got a deal, now you've got 7 days. I'm just putting a number on it. I'm not saying a Chelsea source has said 7 days, but Chelsea have intimated they might put a deadline themselves on Raphinha deciding and then pull the offer. That is a possibility as well. So this is the politics of the window. Now, fans will want to know by 5 o'clock today what the resolution is. It doesn't work because Barca will submit to Leeds, then there'll be a round of talks, then there'll be a determination, then Chelsea will get wind of that determination, and then either this round of talks will lead to an agreement or it will lead to the door being opened wider for Chelsea to come back in. So it's very political. I would say at the moment, it is still likely that Barcelona and Leeds agree a deal that sends Raphinha to Barcelona. But there remains a chance that Chelsea, if this does break down in the next round of talks, will be very bullish with Raphinha. And like I say, they will not let it drag on. At that point, Raphinha will have to decide almost between Leeds and Chelsea, as opposed to between Barcelona and Chelsea. And if it's a straight decision because Barcelona can't get a number between Leeds and Chelsea, then my understanding, contrary to some reports, is that Raphinha will not stay at Leeds and will join Chelsea because he's fine with the financials. It's a 5-year deal. It's a £45,000 a week pay rise. It's Champions League football. Deco has never intimated to Chelsea that personal terms are a problem. He's simply intimated that Raphinha will not commit to those personal terms until he knows what the situation is between Barcelona and Leeds.
Yeah, it's funny because I like the way you word it. And I said this to people all along that for me, I'm just a bit, I don't know, maybe I'm just a very black and white with it. I feel like personal terms are agreed in the sense of the money, the status, that's all fine. He hasn't committed to them and signed to them because he doesn't know exactly where he's going to go. But Chelsea fans have got to realise that Raphinha is open to and to a degree happy to join Chelsea. He just has a childhood dream and desire to play for Barcelona. But if in the end, when you go straight through all the politics, all the negotiations, if Barca can't afford him or are not willing to pay the going rate for him, he's going to leave Leeds. I can't imagine a scenario where he stays at Leeds beyond the end of this summer. And I think that's why I said to Chelsea fans on so many shows, just relax a little bit. This summer is so interesting because so much of the transfer window has become public and we're back to like normality where, and you've been around a long time and you've told me this privately, where this is how most windows have been for a long time. But we went through the period of lockdown where the transfer windows were smaller, there was less business going on, especially from the European teams that had a lot less money than the Premier League teams. And that's when the transfer window really moved onto social media in a big way. We're now just, I think people have got to realize you're going to see multiple transfers like this play out in this way publicly for the foreseeable future. And maybe after 2 or 3 summers, people are going to kind of get used to the fact that very rarely do you have a player that's like, listen, I want to leave my current club and I only want to join Chelsea. Chelsea only. I'm not going to consider anything from anybody else. That very rarely happens. And I think football fans have got to kind of wise up to that a little bit, if that makes sense, that's not quite how the football world works. I think Chelsea have still got a tremendous chance here because you mentioned it earlier. Barca are still trying to sign everybody. I did read a report from a Spanish journalist, although they've announced Christensen and Kounde, there are reports in Spain that they haven't actually officially registered those players with the Ligr yet. So again, I'm only going by the speculation. They want so many people, something somewhere's got to give. They are not going to be able to keep hold of everybody and buy all these players, even after selling these TV rights. Surely they can't.
Well, I mean, they have the cash injection coming in. The question is just squad space, wage bill space, financial fair play, even offset against any incomings. And that might be why they have to still let De Jong go or force De Jong out. And you may remember last time we spoke about De Jong, I said the biggest key to whether De Jong joins Manchester United is Barcelona. Because if Barca continually reiterate to De Jong that he must leave or offer him a choice between leaving for Manchester United or taking a 40% pay cut, then it's clear to the player that the club don't want him. Yeah. And then I think even though he's deliberating, he may be persuaded to move to Manchester United for almost the benefit of the club, which sounds strange to say, but when you get young players that represent teams like Barcelona and they idolize them and it's a dream to be there, if the club asks you to make that kind of move, it might be the final kind of indicator that makes you determine that you don't want to stick around. Obviously, De Jong could just say no to both those options and instead continue on his current contract. And that's the difference between him and Dembele, that he's on good money and he's contracted. So he could just say, sorry, Barcelona, sorry, Manchester United, I'm not going to Old Trafford, I'm not taking a pay cut. It's business as usual and there's nothing you can do. But when you grow up idolizing a club like Barcelona and they say, we need the income or we want you to go, then at a point, a young player like that may say, okay, I'm going to decide to do that. But you're absolutely right that Barcelona want a variety of targets. They have Lewandowski as their priority, along with Raphinha. Dembele keeps missing deadlines to sign, but there's a confidence that he'll do that. And then if they were to bring in those two players plus Dembele and De Jong and not get a wage cut on De Jong, and even with Dembele taking a reduction, him still being on 6 odd million a year, their wage bill becomes difficult to bring in other targets. And let's not forget, they still need another defender, or want one anyway, despite the fact that there's 6 or 7 players overall, including some defenders coming in. And that's where Jules Kounde comes in too. So yeah, they're not going to be able to sign everybody. And yet they always find a way. And this is the kind of thing with Barcelona and how Spain works, that regardless of what Javier Tebas and La Liga say, regardless of what the finances say, regardless of any possible sanctions under financial fair play, history shows us that when Barcelona want a player, they usually find the finances and a means to get them, especially if that player is making a step up to Barcelona and is relatively young. And that's why they're so confident, if not slightly cocky, that they're going to get Raphinha. And the only caveat to that for fans, and I would put Bayern into this category as well when they're talking about Ronaldo to a lesser extent, especially if Lewandowski goes, is that when you hear Laporta say something in public versus how he actually behaves with clubs in private and in negotiations, it's Jekyll and Hyde. So when he says De Jong is staying, when he says Dembele will sign, when he says Raphinha will join, we'll get an agreement, all of that is just PR. And it is to be taken with a pinch of salt, more so than probably any club executive in the world, simply because it's all about building this Barcelona image to the public. And then when you talk to the clubs on the other side that were involved in any of these deals with Barcelona, they say the exact opposite. And the Raphinha deal is a great example of that. And I'm not saying that he always twists the reality, but he jumps the gun because he's willing to engage with media, whereas you don't see that many Premier League owners talking about transfers as openly as Laporta has done. But what I think fans have to understand is just, you need to piece together each quote one by one, and then you start to see the contradictions. So there's a confidence in Raphinha. It's his dream to play for Barcelona. The Spanish media are briefed that a deal has been done. And then Laporta says there's no deadline on it, which tells you that there definitely can't be a fee agreed, because if there was an agreement with Leeds, then Raphinha would essentially be a Barcelona player in a matter of hours or days or weeks, barring the registration. So there's contradictions, there's cracks appearing in the narrative. But yeah, essentially, Barcelona will not get all of their targets, but it is important to stress that of all of the targets that you read, Lewandowski, Raphinha are 1 and 2.
Yeah, and it doesn't. I totally understand, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you mentioned the De Jong thing. There's actually a super chat that's coming. That's why I mentioned this. It says, "Great content, Terry. Are you searching for a charity for that 5K check Fab's post on Frankie?" So I've seen Fabrizio's post, and Fabrizio has just basically reiterated what's been said all summer. No personal terms have been agreed. The player wants to stay at Barca. He loves the club, etc. My point was this, and I stand by this, and I will give 5K to charity. I believe in a lot. Listen, there's reports that Ten Hag and De Jong have spoke very regularly, if not every day. I don't think it'd be every day, but they've spoke regularly over the summer. The agent of De Jong has 2 other players at Man United and knows Ten Hag and Man United very, very well. I don't believe. I listened to every journalist said no personal terms have been discussed, and maybe they mean officially. I cannot believe that United would be 7-8 weeks into this, the contacts they have with the player, and no element of I would join in this scenario or this much money would be discussed. I can't imagine us getting a bid accepted by Barca. We walk into a room with De Jong, and this is what my bet was, that he opens up his hands and goes, "Listen, Eric, what are you doing here? I told you I'm not coming." I don't see that happening. Personally, I just don't think Eric, forget Man United being stupid, we've been in the past. I just don't see Eric Ten Hag being that dumb. with someone he knows. It doesn't compute in my head as logical. But I've said, if it turns out we get rejected by De Jong and the view is, I told you I was going to reject you, it's done, I don't know why you bid, then I'll give 5K to charity live on the air. Because personally, I just can't see a world where we get everything accepted, we walk into a room with De Jong and he's like, why are you here, Erik? It just doesn't make sense to me personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because, again, following the window, you'll hear agreement is close, advanced talks, fees being discussed, and it doesn't always match the reality either. So Manchester United have been in deep, deep talks with Barcelona. And like you say, there is an argument that there's no reason for doing that unless you stand a very realistic chance of getting the player. Yet, one of the reasons, coming back to what I said before, why Manchester United thought they had a realistic chance and still do of getting De Jong is because they know or knew when the talks first started that Barcelona needed the cash injection. And that was also why Barcelona were being so pedantic over every add-on, because the fee has to be of a certain amount, or had to be a few weeks ago and a few months ago, because Barcelona needed that income. And at that point, they were thinking, well, yikes, we've got to pay Dembele, and maybe an improved offer would have been put down if things were less acrimonious a few months back. And then there's the Lewandowski factor and the Raphinha factor and so on. Now they've got a bit of money in, and I genuinely believe that Barcelona would quite like to keep De Jong if they possibly could. And because now they don't financially necessarily need the income as urgently as a few months ago, they can play even more hard ball. So I don't think the clubs have ever got full agreement, particularly over the add-ons. That's the first thing to say. And then with De Jong, the very first conversation that we had on this, probably 2 months ago now, I said that I felt De Jong's belief that he wanted to stay at Barcelona, that he'd put on record saying it was his dream club, was genuine. And I've kind of stuck by that throughout this whole saga, that I don't honestly think De Jong wants to leave Barcelona. And I don't think that he will leave Barcelona unless Barcelona tell him that that is their preference. Yeah. So again, my opinion on this whole saga has been pretty consistent and pretty simple and pretty ironic almost, that the best way Manchester United have got of landing De Jong is with Barcelona's blessing. And by blessing, I don't mean agreeing financial terms. I don't mean talking about add-ons. I mean Barcelona telling De Jong that it is their preference he leaves. Yeah. If Barcelona tell De Jong their preference is for him to stay, then Manchester United may as well walk away and find somebody else, because Barcelona can afford to keep De Jong now. They've got income coming in. They'll have more money coming in. And De Jong wants, much like Raphinha, to stay at Barcelona because it's his dream club. So that's what Manchester United are reliant on. But the longer it drags on now, I think the less likely this particular deal is to actually happen.
And listen, all of what you said there, I agree with. I think if they decide to keep him, he absolutely stays. I also think that you have to look at Frankie as an individual here and take it away from football. They owe him around £19 million in deferred wages. Now, I've worked in many corporate environments where, I've done deals where you're due a bonus. But if you leave the organization before a particular date, you don't get your bonus. It wouldn't be, the Neymar deal a few years ago when he left, it protruded for a lot of the summer. And then it all turned out afterwards. It's because if he left before a particular date, there was a big bonus that him and his agent, who I believe is his father, wouldn't have received. So I also believe there's an element here of, if I leave Barcelona for Man United, even if they ask me to, I might forfeit all this money. Like there was talk earlier in the summer that if PK retired, he didn't get the 80 odd million euros they owe him. So there's all these little things going on, which I think make this, as you say, really, really difficult. And maybe in the end, Barca just say, it's just, he isn't going to leave. He doesn't want to leave. He isn't going to take a pay cut. He isn't going to defer the money. We've got some money raised. Let's just keep him and play him. But as I said before, I just don't see, my point was this. I don't see Manchester. A few people say I'm changing the goalpost. No, go back and listen to what I said. I don't see us getting everything agreed with Barca, walking into a room with De Jong and him still saying no. And whether that's because he'd like to play for us or he's doing it for Barca, either which way, I don't really care as a Man United fan. I believe he'd then join, because I don't believe Ten Hag, I think if Ten Hag phoned him and said, if Barca bid, will you come to accept? Would you come to us? And he said, no, I'm not coming to Man United. I don't see Ten Hag allowing the transfer to go for. Does that make sense? That bit doesn't make logical sense to me for a man like Ten Hag to do. He just wouldn't do that. If Frankie told him I'm not coming, point blank, no matter what happens, we wouldn't be talking to Barcelona. So that's my point to people at the personal terms. It's not that important whether you believe they've been discussed or not, because Erik ten Hag, you look at his family and how they've made their money outside of football. They're not bloody idiots. Do you know what I'm saying? They're not stupid. But Grant here says,
I was just going to add for education, really, just briefly. During the transfer window, we constantly say personal terms, and it's a meaningless phrase. So personal terms don't actually mean or cover that much. So when you hear of a player discussing personal terms, it's the wage, naturally, and that is a form of personal term. So there's negotiation as to what you will earn and whether you will agree with that. But beyond that, there's not a great deal to it other than the sort of broad sense in the player's mind of, do they want to join the club, which is not put down on paper. That's about talking to the manager. That falls under a personal term. It's about the fit in the team. It's about a desire to move. Who are the teammates? But when people use the word personal terms and will the player agree or won't the player agree, it's the financial value on offer. And 99 times out of 100, even though there's some back and forth, the club going in and trying to get the player will know the ballpark and what they can get them for, which is why Raphinha is perfectly happy with the, if you want to call it that, personal terms. But sometimes I wish people would like break it down a bit more specifically. This is my point, because you can actually call it desire to join, fit in the team, the pitch from the buying club, and wage. So again, if you bring it back to Raphinha, the wage is fine, the fit in the team is fine, the manager is fine, the club and what it has to offer is fine. But these aren't really personal terms. So with De Jong, the reason why he would be fine with Manchester United's, if you want to call it that, personal terms, is because it's a choice between Barcelona's offer where they want him to take a pay cut and Manchester United's offer where he'll be amply compensated. And whether that ample compensation would or wouldn't have some back and forth, the financials are not the problem. So again, it's whether De Jong actually wants to join Manchester United or stay at Barcelona. And for me, that's not a personal term. That is a personal desire. So it's vital not to confuse the wages and the financials. And De Jong's not going to say no to Manchester United's offer in that area. But it boils down to, does he actually have the desire, the personal gut kind of excitement, passion to join United? And that's not going back and forth on paper. That's not going back and forth in debate. That's not being put between lawyers and agents. It's all just what is in his head. That's what will make this deal either a goer or not.
Couldn't agree with you more on that, Ben. On Chelsea, there was another midfielder yesterday, Nunes, that was linked with this move. There's reports from Portugal there was going to be a bid that's come in for him. Is there any truth to that? Is it a player they're looking at, or is that just very much rumours at this stage?
It's all rumour, and I don't know where the report came from, other than that it took off very quickly in the morning yesterday. But I've been in conversations with a number of sources, including, by the way, the player's agent, who said very openly that it's just rumour. So there's been no approach made. There's no substance to it at the moment. There's denials from Chelsea sources that any kind of offer is being prepared. And the only real thing to watch on it is just to understand the genesis of who represents the player. So he is not represented by Mendes, but Mendes's agency has a partnership with Nunes's agent. So therefore, there could be construed to be two voices that might be able to speak on behalf of the player. But obviously his agent will know the reality of the situation regardless. So I think what people have done is they've put two and two together and they've said, well, Todd Boehly met Jorge Mendes. We think that Nunes is represented by Mendes. Therefore, they must have spoken about him. And now a few weeks later, a bid is being prepared and everyone gets really excited. But actually, Mendes has a partnership only with the agent of the player, and the agent of the player says there's been no approach, he's not aware of any offer, and it's all just rumor. So that's one at the moment to watch naturally over the course of the window, but I think most people close to the player were quite baffled by that one yesterday. So it clearly isn't in any kind of advanced state.
That makes perfect sense. And there's been a lot of talk about Jules Kounde, Kimpembe now looks like he might be allowed to leave PSG. De Ligt as well. Like every day that the story changes. He prefers Bayern, he prefers the Prem, prefers Chelsea. It changes. What's happening with Chelsea's pursuit of a centre back?
They need one. They need two, in fact. That's the short answer. And the long answer is that by needing two, there's dozens of names on their shortlist, all of which have to be factored into the financial plan for the window, which is a challenge when you're Chelsea and you need probably 6 players, definitely 2 attackers, arguably a midfielder, 2 centre-backs, maybe a right-back, maybe a goalkeeper. So it might even be more than 6 come the end of the window, especially if Kepa has conversations and determines that he wants to leave for the right offer. Centre-back wise, Chelsea's number 1 priority has really in the last month always been De Ligt, and they are yet to agree a fee. And when you're talking to Juventus for a 22-year-old that they paid a lot of money for and has a release clause in excess of 100 million euros, and then Bayern's interest comes in, it's obvious that there's a bit of a bidding war going on. And both clubs will say they don't want to get sucked into that, but Juventus don't care. They just want to get the maximum amount of money. And the challenge as well is that I think it's unlikely that Juve will get Koulibaly. I'm not sure that he's sold on that move, and therefore a ready-made replacement won't just be easy for them to find. And until they get one, they're going to hold out for as much money as they possibly can. Yeah. It's untrue to say the player either favours Chelsea or Bayern. Some of those reports from Germany saying that he's pro-Bayern are naturally part of a narrative to try and sell the fact publicly that that move is becoming ever likely. And similarly, when you hear that he much prefers Chelsea and he's open to that move and he's intent on the Premier League, that has a spin on it as well. The reality, as far as I understand it, is that the player hasn't made up his mind and is going to take his time because Bayern and Chelsea are clubs that he is open to. So all we know at this stage is that De Ligt wants out. And if an agreement can be reached, then he will make his decision. And I think it's highly, highly likely that both clubs will end up getting some kind of agreement with Juve rather than only just one, because neither want to pay above the odds, both factoring in things like swap deals, even though I think it will end up being a straight cash deal, because the swap deal element was really only after the price goes above 75 or 80 odd million. And we are creeping towards that now. So like Chelsea's starting position here was that they were going to bid about 60. That was always going to be too low. It crept up to around 65, which would rise to about 70 odd million with the add-ons. And Chelsea were quite hopeful of that. But now Bayern have come back in and suddenly that price is 75 and could even push 80. And if it gets to 80 odd million, which I think is quite high, then that's where you start saying, well, let's try and maybe bring it back to that sort of 50 or 60 mark and chuck in a player. And I know that Bayern are exploring swap deals. I know Chelsea have been linked with offering Pulisic, who is open to Serie A, by the way, Werner or Jorginho. And Jorginho is the really interesting one because Juventus are really keen on him anyway, but want to discuss that as a separate deal. And as the price rises, there still may be the ability for Boehly to negotiate a swap deal around this. But nobody's agreed a fee at the moment, any kind of full agreement. And there's no front runner. It's a very open race. It reminds me of Martinez between Manchester United and Arsenal. You'll hear sources in Germany say they're leading. You'll hear sources in England say that Chelsea are leading. All I know at this stage is that Juventus are playing hardball. They're not entirely against a swap deal, but a straight cash deal looks more likely. And it's going to move quite quickly because Chelsea, as we've seen throughout the window, don't want to have things drag on. And that's the Boehly hands-on mentality. Yeah. And fans may say we keep missing out on targets, but my counterpoint to that is, why are you missing out on targets? You're missing out on targets because your owner is not prepared to mess around with lost causes. He's not prepared to have things drag on. And when you get an owner like that, they swoop in quickly and decisively, and they say effectively deal or no deal. And when the answer is no deal, they walk away and you hear about it. And then you think, oh, we failed. But much better that than it just drag on throughout the window with countless possibilities that don't materialize. And then still you fail. So I think that this bullishness, this quickness of negotiation of Boehly, when it works, is going to lead fans to say, wow, maybe you get Ronaldo in a week. Maybe Raphinha comes off. Sterling has come in. That deal will be fully completed today, as I understand it. And then fans are like, I'm really excited. This ownership group are ambitious. They're moving quick. They don't mess around. They put offers down on the table. But when the flip side happens and you do all of that and you don't get your player, it's failure. It's another missed target. Whereas other clubs like Arsenal with Tielemans, they don't do that. They wait and wait and wait and wait. And then if they get the player, it's like, oh, we knew that was happening. Just announce it. And if they don't get the player, then people go, oh, God, it's Arsenal again. They're indecisive. So I think that's just the nature of the window. And you can sell the narrative either way. And obviously that's the counterpoint to the argument that Chelsea are just missing out on countless targets. But yeah, I think with Delete, Chelsea are firmly in the race. Bayern are firmly in the race. And at the moment, it's completely unclear how the next sort of step is going to go. I think the first club that agree a deal are going to be in a very, very strong position, especially if that's Chelsea, because of Bayern's sort of tact in not wanting to overpay and wanting to also stump up a lower upfront fee. But the player's open to both moves. And I know that sounds like I'm sitting on the fence, but I don't like to sensationalize things when there's not a story to sensationalize. And right now, it is genuinely an open race.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. And you mentioned already the Lisandro Martinez situation. Yeah, Raphinha's open for different reasons. But when there's no player preference, it really makes it exciting to watch who's going to pull it off, who's going to win this deal. And I agree with you on the Boehly situation. I like how they're doing it. It's very much he's buying players how I do my shopping. I go to Blue Water or I go to Lakeside or Westfields. I go in, I know what I want. I'm like, boom. They don't have it in there. I move on to something else. I don't walk around every shop first and then start going back to the first shop. So actually, I did like that pair of jeans in shop 1. I like those shoes from shop 3. Just get in there and get it done. I quite like the approach. And I think Chelsea will pull off some really good signings this summer. No shadow of a doubt about that whatsoever. Viewers, we are just under to 250 likes. We're away, and I'll be gifting those 20 memberships. So 250 more of you need to hit the like button right now. Also, if you fancy securing your internet services, please scan the QR code on the screen to use private internet access. It really protects you against hackers. 3 months free, courtesy of the Football Terrace. Give that a little bit of a scan or click on the link in the description below. But it certainly feels, Ben, like the window's sort of picking up again now. The Premier League's only a month away from starting. Pre-season starts as well. So at least there's some games to start watching soon, even though they are kind of pre-season based. You said in the sort of the build up to the show, we were talking about what kind of subjects you're on. We've kind of covered most things. We know Sterling's pretty much done now, as it were. That's going to happen really for Chelsea. You mentioned Lewandowski, and we touched him a little bit earlier. I know Barca want him. Bayern are kind of playing hardball with that. Is it still likely that he only goes to Barcelona, or could there be the possibility of another team sweeping in and taking him away from them if indeed they can't get a deal done with Bayern Munich?
No, Lewandowski seemingly wants one destination, and that is only a move to Barcelona. And given he is the number one priority for Barcelona, I don't think there'll be any problems with getting this one over the line before the window ends. Lewandowski has had interest, for example, from Chelsea. And every time a club has come and said, what if Barcelona falls through, it's been told pretty clearly back to that other club that there's no realistic chance of progressing a deal. So were we, for example, to get to the dying days of the window and still Barcelona don't have it across the line, that's when you have this sort of late opportunism where somebody could swoop in. But I think Bayern are ultimately looking for a replacement. Naturally, that's why they've been linked with CR7. And also, they want the cash up front in the deal. So Barcelona, therefore, can't negotiate this on their terms. And Barca want to have staggered payments, and there's still some negotiation over the kind of add-ons and fee aspects. Barcelona's initial offer was crazily low, around kind of 35 million euros. So off top of my head, that's only about 27 million pounds. And I know you can kind of look at things like age or contract situations and so on, but Sadio Mane was 35 million quid. That's the best part of 45 million euros. Don't at me if I get these conversions wrong. I'm not very good at going from pounds to euros and euros to pounds. And remember, I work for CBS, so everything we do on air is in dollars. But I think that was probably 15 or 20 million off the going rate. And since then, they've crept closer and they've crept closer. And I think there will be a fee agreed, but it's a case of how that fee is paid as well. And that's where Bayern are playing a little bit more hardball. And why are they doing that? First of all, because he's a world-class player. And second of all, because it buys them time to assess the lay of the land, to see whether another suitor comes in, and to look for a ready-made replacement. And I think this is a big part of the window that fans, again, don't quite get, that the selling club, which is always a really interesting perspective to look at something from, are offering up their players and leveraging a deal that they probably know is going to happen against other clubs intentionally, because they want to almost provide, this isn't the best phrase to use, but a false hope to a Chelsea. And an agent will do this as well, obviously, when they want to put their player out into the market to drum up publicity. But the selling club tactic is always really interesting, because if Bayern can get Chelsea to say, a bit like with Raphinha, I suppose, come in with a 50 million offer and we'll accept it, then at that point, it drives up the price for Barcelona. It provides a little bit of sort of value out there in the market to anyone else that might be interested within the window. And it ensures then that the selling club get the best possible price. And that's exactly what Leeds United have done, albeit without that false hope, because they do want to sell to Chelsea. And, it doesn't cost you anything to make an offer. So if Chelsea even had a 1% interest in Lewandowski and they were willing to agree a fee, it doesn't cost Chelsea anything to just verbally or even formally say, we'll give you that 50 million, providing that they actually are prepared to stump it up and they think it's value. But it's priceless to a club like Bayern Munich to have that in their back pocket, because then they can go back to Barcelona and say, well, now we want the market value. Now there's a bidding war. Now we want the cash up front. And that is exactly what Leeds United are doing. So it's a tactic from Bayern to delay this for various reasons. But by the end of the window, I fully anticipate Lewandowski being a Barcelona player, simply because he said so openly it's the only club he wants to go to. And even if Barcelona's finances are difficult, the small bits they can do using capital up front and the income that they've received to allow them to spend in the market will all be prioritized on Lewandowski first and foremost, simply because he is their number one target.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very, very much. People are telling me to go check something out here. When people say check Twitter, viewers, never tell me to check Twitter. Tell me what you want me to go check, because Twitter's a pretty big platform. I get so confused. And I'm like, I gotta go check Twitter. I'm like, for what reason? I don't know what you're asking me to check here, people. Someone write it in the comment sections. I think he suggested that Frankie de Jong to Chelsea is what's being said. Chelsea are very interested in Frankie de Jong, but Marcos Alonso and Azpilicueta won't be involved in any swap deal, is what's being said there. We've heard for a few days now that Chelsea are monitoring that situation.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea have made no secret of the fact that he's a player that Thomas Tuchel admires, and naturally, as they see a roadblock in the Manchester United negotiations, there's an area of sort of uncertainty where Chelsea can be opportunistic. But again, if Barcelona don't want to sell De Jong to Manchester United for a market value price, and if De Jong doesn't want to leave for Manchester United, then Chelsea have got a range of hurdles to overcome. First of all, they're certainly going to have to match the price that Manchester United have been speaking about. and still add those other 6 or 7 that I've spoken about, all within, I would have thought, a maximum of 250 million, if not 200 million. Chelsea are not going to spend 300 million this window and look at the price of De Jong and then do the maths, which again is a challenge if a Declan Rice became available. Not that he will, by the way, this window, just so I don't inadvertently create
You're going to see some quote tweets. There'll be some quote tweets and just that little segment. Yeah.
But I mean, you know, De Jong is a more realistic target for Manchester United than Chelsea at the moment, or a more priority target, I should say. If Chelsea come in the market, I think they would blow Manchester United out of the water. But what I mean to say is that Manchester United are more advanced, and it is a more realistic possibility of Manchester United rather than Chelsea. But Chelsea are absolutely monitoring that. And as regards swap deals, I don't think that was ever going to be a realistic.
They don't really happen. Even the swap deals that have been proposed, all sorts
might go under Boehly. They might a bit more.
Boehly likes it, doesn't he? And Barca do want the players. So let's see. Vicky, to answer your super chat here, United haven't pulled away because they still believe there's a chance of getting it done at this moment in time. And the fact that there's 6-7 weeks left of the window, there's no need to pull away right now. If we were with a week to go, maybe, but I think watch this space on that one. And thank you. I want to say we've hit the number. We've hit over 1,500 likes. So here you go, people. Gifted by the Terrace is going to be those 20 memberships. They'll be coming through in the live chat now. I'm not too sure who they're going to go to. The chat's normally too quick to actually catch them all on my screen, but we switched it to member only chat to slow it down a bit here. So that's been done. That's been gifted. So let's see who they give out these members to. Just want to name them out loud as that's done. I'll put it onto member chat only. So Andy Gill has been gifted a membership. Salabonga, Rob MUFC, Undisputed Boxing, Huban Tran, Salja, San Francisco? San Francisco has been gifted one. Ahmed Zagmin, J1, Sir Sharif, Adrian King, Gamma, Akam King, Yaza, Outcast, loads more people getting them here. Who else have got them? Jonathan People, Raymond, Subhandeep, and Manchi 12, all brand new members of the Football Terrace. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I didn't do the fanfare for all of you because that'd be 20 of these. And Ben doesn't want to hear 20 of these all after one another. He doesn't want to do it. So thank you. But Ben, listen, I really appreciate all the updates and insight today. I know you had a long travel back from Manchester this morning to be able to come on and have your say. Really appreciate it as ever. Big thank you to you. I'm sure we'll speak again next week, it's getting exciting now. The football's starting. The transfers are coming through thick and fast. Viewers, smash the like button before you leave. And until next time, everybody, take care. Goodbye.